spongiform encephalopathy. So essentially the vaccines have been injecting everyone with a toxin that is going to go into people's brains and rot them, potentially. Now, if you think about that for a second, that is there. Well, there's no words to describe it, really, is there? And what the scientist is saying is, well, we thought it was a good idea, but now we realise it's potentially exceptionally dangerous. Why? Because vaccines do need a long development and testing period for their safety. It's a bit like a few months ago the malaria vaccine came out, and it was reported that it's highly effective, but it will still take 2 years and before it becomes available to the general public. All of these licenses are on temporary 1-year all of these vaccines for corona are temporary 1-year licenses pending further submission of data. It is staggering. And I did have the first vaccine of AstraZeneca, thinking that at least I'd go for an old technology one because it's a attenuated chimpanzee adenovirus, and maybe that might save my bacon. I'm certainly not going to have the second dose. The reason I had it is because of potentially vaccine passports coming out, and I thought, well, I don't believe in the vaccine, but at least, I'm living in society.
There's a benefit.
I need to have, but even they're not going to come out now because they're deemed to be too controversial, and also there's because of these excuses of variants, which we've already discussed are irrelevant. They're now talking about new vaccines and boosters to them. It is absolute nonsense and a beyond description waste of money and resources. And of course, the only potential mechanism of adherence is fear, and therefore the governments are still trying to instigate fear in everyone. Now, in the past, if you needed to rally a nation, you just declare war on someone. But the trouble is, you can't use conventional war. Conventional war is not practical anyway. Nuclear war is not practical. And so now you've got to do other types of warfare, such as cyber warfare or bio warfare.
I think what is concerning me with all of this is going back to previous podcasts where we talked about politicians actually trying to run or govern anything. We go back to the word government. It's to govern, but from afar, not micromanaging. And because they've got this new level of power, they're tasting and enjoying this. They're digesting it. It's been over a year now. They don't want to let go of it.
Well, you see, that's the trouble.
Never-ending.
It's vested interest. Yes, it's excuse for the authority.
It is.
It's a bit like, all you have to do is look at Nicola Sturgeon. She loves going on TV and telling how careful she's being for her entire nation.
Have you noticed how I've noticed since she became the First Minister, she talks a lot slower now because it's more statesman-like to make a point. And I'm going to be scripted and say only 20 words, but my God, those words are going to have gravitas. I am the leader of the nation. She does speak in Churchill-like mannerisms, because she really does believe in this statesman-like, power-mad. She wants to be the sort of Scottish Margaret Thatcher, and she is not even a blip on the landscape. No. She's nowhere.
Exactly. And again, the same thing for poor old Keir Starmer. Yeah. Again, as we said, he's clearly a right shifter with no... And right shifters, as we said, are on the Asperger's end of the spectrum, so they have no real finger on the pulse of human emotion and understanding, because they simply are there to rigidly apply the law irrespective of morals and ethics.
But I think we're going back to a subject which is close to my heart, which is identity. And I think, and we're talking about the example that we spoke about offline this morning with Canada, and we'll go back to that in a minute. But I think that the important thing that we're on Keir Starmer is, in my humble opinion, 2 or 3 golden opportunities to redefine the Labour Party. He was brought in as a breath of fresh air. Well, you can argue why he was brought in. He was brought in because he was more conservative than the Conservatives that were currently in power, and seen as a very intelligent, approachable. They thought he was a good speaker because of his past as a barrister. But to go back to my original point, there were very, very clear and simple messages from the senior people in the Labour Party that were then going for the leadership at the time. And since the Labour lost the election and lost, I think, about 100 seats or near enough, 80-odd seats, which was a huge amount. It was like 30-odd% they lost, which is massive. They've never seen such a loss in 100 years. Yet, nobody in power, in the committee or close proximities of Mr. Kirsten was going, you know what, we need to redefine ourselves. We need to do what Mr. Blair did many years ago, call it New Labour, whatever you want to call it. We need something that people can identify with, because at the moment the Conservative Party are riding on the vaccine and Brexit. And Mr. Boris Johnson got lucky with Brexit, because it's actually, with the vaccine, has actually gone into his favour of, oh, look, we've ordered them in advance, and look how good we are. We started much earlier than everybody. Isn't that a great example of having a nation where you're in charge of your own affairs? Yeah, he's got the chance to say, right, what is Labour? What is it about? What does it mean to people? Is it going towards the work? Is it more about human independence or human rights? So what is it? Is it social independence? What is it? He hasn't yet defined it. Now, he's got already a few people with the knives that are coming out, because he lost a couple of very, very big elections. And you can see the quicksand.
Well, you see, the wonderful thing about Boris Johnson is, because he has absolutely no morals or ethics, is entirely self-serving. He just hops around and does whatever he thinks the populace will be interested in, which leaves poor Labour without anything to do.
Well, because we said in the last podcast, I think the current, I wouldn't even call them the Conservatives. I said the current government, the current party in government, are left, they're right, they're middle, they're controlling, they're everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't defined yourself as the old left-wing party that was Labour of yesteryear, and in the modern climate that we're in, especially with what we're going through now, what is Labour all about? Well, if you've got a government that are blocking all the holes and saying, we're helping you, we're giving you the vaccine, so the NHS which is more of a left-wing Labour thing, that's been taken. Leadership, well, we're leading the world. Can't argue about that. So that's identity with Britain.
And then
being out of Europe.
Look at him trying.
We're out of Europe, so we're in control of our own affairs, so we control our own people, give the jobs to our own people, not allow people from, sorry to say, about immigration from other countries. So that's his card gone as well with immigration. What's he got left?
Well, making fun of Boris Johnson, which is a big mistake, because you can't make fun of a clown. Yeah,
He does it by himself.
correct. What's the point of making fun of a clown? Not possible.
Well, you've got recent examples where the Conservative Party, look at the moment, going back to Cummins, the Conservative parties are shooting themselves in the left foot with a sawn-off shotgun. You couldn't get something more obvious and more in your face than what's going on at the moment. Yet the Labour Party can't even capitalise on this, or because A, they don't have somebody who's leading at all and who's identified what Labour Party is. So that's the first thing. What do we stand for? And secondly, you've got somebody like Keir Starmer who's actually not as ballsy and not as charismatic and not as great as we all thought he would be. And he's got an opportunity right in front of him to, A, start to identify the Labour Party slowly and use this opportunity to say, great. And all he does is use the same rhetoric of 20, 30, 40 years ago that has been used and abused of, oh, well.
But well, you see, that the difficulty is he's clearly a, as we said, a very right-shifted, Aspergian, principled gentleman. And that, of course, carries a lot of weight in court, where you're simply dryly applying the rules, which will be highly respected by a judge, as long as the judges have understood the case in the first place, which a lot don't. But not for politics, I'm afraid. Now, the other thing that we talked about very briefly was the issue of how the media address and weigh on certain things, give weight to certain things. And you brought it to my attention, and if you think about it, it is absolutely staggering what happens. So you mentioned to me another Hollywood producer.
There was a current producer who is the producer of the Afterlife Netflix series, the top 3 Netflix series, global Netflix series with Ricky Gervais. Even though he was accused of certain wrongdoings with females going back from 2008 to 2015, and the Afterlife has only been recorded in the last 2 years because he's associated with that program, then immediately guilty until proven innocent. I thought it was the other way around, but obviously not, because political correctness has now achieved or created this playing field. So now this guy has been literally struck off everything he's involved in, everything he's paid for. He's been told, no, sorry. Even Ricky Gervais said, no, we've removed him from the production team. End of. As from today, his comments were, I'm sure the right process will be followed, or something like that.
Where is the logic in that?
Well, the man,
the justice or the logic.
So God forbid, if we don't believe in this anymore, then that's the end of our society.
Well, even the law hasn't put him on remand, have they?
But that's the point. The point is, if there isn't a chance that he might be innocent, therefore that implies that he's got the right to defend his reputation.
Beyond reasonable doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt. Then he's already being vilified.
Trialed by media.
Trialed by media.
And yet...
And here we go back to the media and the power.
And yet
media,
several hundred postmasters and mistresses were
exonerated recently because
wrongfully imprisoned.
But imprisoned, hundreds of them, because the software system they had was basically telling them, or the head office of there was a lady who's now stepped down, who was running, and I've forgotten her name, Dame something, and they were told, sorry, but you owe us each one load between a few thousand to God knows how much, and they were protesting this and saying, I'm sorry, but here are my manual records to prove that I have a faultless record. I've been running this post office for 20, 30 years. This is my livelihood. It's in the center of the village, center of the community. I would never do something like this. Can we talk about this? Can we talk through? They were not interested. They were literally taken to court. Here are the facts. The system says, computer says no. You are now being
and that's the trouble, because you see, when in court, you need money for barristers, and the trouble is, corporations have money, individuals do not.
Yeah, but let's go back to the original point about how media pick and choose what they think is the story.
Well, that's right.
The narrative.
And
this is about the common people. This is about the country. This is about
what matters.
People. What really matters, people who've lost their livelihoods, who've got their name and reputation in tatters. Yes, they've been exonerated, but they spent 2 years in prison.
Do you know what happens when you go to prison, by the way? One of my patients, who's a barrister, was put on remand 6 months. And he said, the police just come and get you. Don't care.
It's a prison of sorts, isn't it?
Well, it is prison. But the point is, the mechanism is, they just come and get you wherever you are.
Whatever time they want,
they'll come and pick you up. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what responsibilities you have, bills, anything going on. Doesn't matter. You disappear, literally in a puff of smoke, and you sit in prison. And not only was he entirely exonerated, but apparently the prosecution went through every single point and told the judge why they weren't proceeding, and yet this good man spent 6 months cooling his heels. No bills paid, nothing, no compensation, zilch. And this happened to hundreds of innocent people. And yet the media decide to brush that under the carpet, or give it hardly any weight at all, and talk about some person who knows what happened. We just don't know, and that's the point, isn't it?
Now, going back to the current state of affairs and using what you just said as a tenuous link. I'm not saying who, but I know it's been happening over the last 4, 5, 6 months. People have been, sorry to say, breaking the rules. There are people that have, in times where they shouldn't have gone to see their friends and close family.
What?
We know from the happiness study that actually being close to your friends and being there when it's needed, especially older people who are alone, people have broken the rules. Oh no, hang on a minute, that rings a bell. The guy who's a senior advisor to government who's now been sacked broke his own rules by twice going out of a certain zone and visiting his family in Derby or wherever hell it was.
And he's the one who's now saying it should have been applied more strictly and with urgency.
So there goes the credibility already in one foul swoop. But if you go back to the current situation where people have broken with normal, nice citizens, British subjects, who have actually said, you know what?
Shocking. 10,000